your story is so relatable to a lot of people, and it starts with being in kind of a bad place.
Yes.
So talk about what the bad place and the state of unhealth was for you.
Yeah, so 10 years ago, went through a bad divorce, went through some domestic abuse, and found my way out through health and wellness. I didn't want to dwell in the negative. So I was like, I was in a dark place at that time. I look back and I can laugh about it now, you know what I mean? Because you have to find the funny humor in it, right? Because I look at the place I was at and the part I played, right? And I always say, what's the part I played? And I say my children, who are now 16, 17, my son was a huge, tremendous part that he played to help me find the humor. Because one day he looked at me, he's like, Mom, you're kind of a fat, chunky chunk.
Just what the moms love to hear.
But what he meant was that my soul was, right? I was crying, I was drinking a lot of wine, I wasn't sleeping well, I was not working out like I should have, and just everything was a mess. And so sometimes, Kristi, you have to go down to get back up, right? And it was the first time in my life at 30 some years old I had ever went through anything in life, anything. And so it was kind of an aha moment, right? That everything is not perfect. And it's okay that everything isn't perfect, and that sometimes you have to go through it to get to it. So
go through it to get through it. I love that. So a couple of things that you said I want to point out. Number one, when you're talking about the part that you played, you're talking the part that you played in your health, not the part that you played in a domestic abuse victim.
Both.
So I think people would hear that and say, nobody deserves to be a domestic abuse victim. How could you possibly play a part in that?
So the part I played, as soon as you go through something, right? As soon as you recognize the signs, the part you play is to address them, not to sweep them underneath the rug.
So that means the first time that you are called a name or are hit or are pushed and you think, oh no, it's just, he was having a bad day.
Absolutely. No, that's when it stops. So you either put a stop to it then, or you keep playing a part, right? You keep playing a role in that series that keeps happening. And I realized where I was not one of those victims that was like punched, but the threat, the intimidation that happened for a long time. And if anyone knows me, I'm pretty strong. So like, I didn't just come, I've always been this way. I've always been a very confident, strong woman. I was raised this way by both parents. They're great parents that taught me to be this way. But it all of a sudden happened after 8 years of marriage that here I am in a corner, backed up. And I'm like, what is happening? And then I realized as the mental and emotional abuse got worse and worse, I was letting it happen. And then the part I played, Kristi, is I was giving it back, right? The defense mechanism part that stepped in. And I realized that looking back, I was just like, well, if you're going to give it, I'm going to give it. Well, that's not who I am. I lead with empathy and love. And then I realized, oh, that's what I'm doing now. I'm doing something that someone's doing to me because I'm hurt. So I'm hurting them back.
Because hurt people hurt people. Yeah.
Right.
So was it your son saying, Mom, man, this is not who you are, essentially, and only the language that a son could give to his mother, that you realized it? Like, did you need the words to like snap out of it? Because I think the other part of your story, Shay, that so many people can relate to is when you get to a bad place that you played a part in, it's not one day everything is great, the next day it's terrible.
Right.
There's this slow fade into the abyss.
Absolutely. And so by the time my son said this, Kristi, I had been out of my home with my husband for 2 years.
Oh goodness. So you had already gotten the courage to leave.
Yeah, I had left. Oh yeah, I wasn't in that situation very long. It took about 6 months of the mess. And then I was like, I'm gone. But here I am still dealing with it.
So you're dealing with the emotional.
Oh, I was still dealing with him.
Oh, you were not living there, but still dealing with him.
Yeah, the back and forth. So here I'm still dealing with it, trying to remove my children from the situation because I didn't want them to ever see that because they weren't ever really around it. It was isolated situations. But now what they're seeing, what I thought that I was not paying the part, was they're seeing their mother like the downfall. Right. So I'm thinking they don't know anything that mom and dad are going through, which a lot of parents think their kids don't. But my son sits on my lap and he's like 5'6" and he's like, squeeze my face. He's like, Mommy, you're such a fat, chunky chunk. And so if you would have told me that as a friend, I would have bawled or I would have got angry, as all of us do. Instead, I just kind of laughed because I was like, oh, I see what he's saying. Mm-hmm. I see exactly what he's saying. And I was like, all right, and I took myself, put it in the bed and went upstairs, took all my clothes off. I looked at the mirror and I was like, you got to get your stuff together. Like, what are you doing? You are not together. And that was the pivotal point. And it was the aha moment. And it was just like, people are like, oh, they want to have this like, oh, poor Shay. I'm like, don't poor Shay me. I'm fine. Like, I had to have that. We all need that, like, kind of like slap in the face or that, kick in the butt. It's like kind of wherever you are in life, it's like going to get you to that next level. And that's what I needed at that moment.
We talk about this on the podcast in different ways because nobody wants the dark, painful stuff, and nobody wants their kids to have dark, painful stuff. And yet, without the bottom, there is no peak.
Top. Yep, there's no top, right? And that's always my motto. There's one way to the top, because you have to, once you hit the bottom, then what other way are you going to go, right? So where I always thought, life was peachy keen. I had this great life. I'm born and raised in Edina. I have these great parents, and I've always had this great life, right? I always got everything I wanted, right? My parents said, you work hard, you get what you want. And I always did. And then it all fell apart. And then I was a spoiled brat. Like, how could this be happening to me? And whoa, poor Shay and all this stuff.
I deserve.
Like, I am entitled to get everything. And why would I possibly be going through this? And it was just, and so I don't regret anything I went through, right? I don't wish that on anyone, right? I don't wish it.
You never want your daughter to do that.
No, she won't.
You'll be there.
Yeah, no, she won't. But it was a difficult time, right? And there's some things that you don't think that you need to do. And the biggest thing I tell anyone through their journey is to be able to forgive. You may never get the I'm sorry. You may never get the peace from the other person that you think you deserve. But if you can forgive them immediately for the part that they played, because they may never recognize what they did. They may always blame you. But if you say, I forgive you, even if you just say it to yourself, I'm telling anyone that's listening, it will help you in your journey.
And you make a great point that I think some people spend their whole lives waiting for the other person to accept the forgiveness or acknowledge it, or even to acknowledge the hurt. But again, if we go back to hurt people, the hurt person may still be at the bottom of at the darkest place and may never be rising out of it. So they may just sit there. So again, it's take ownership of what you can control, and you can control your forgiveness. You can control your journey to some degree. You can control your mindset. But interesting, man, I don't deserve this. Right. I deserve an easy, amazing, beautiful fairy tale life. I'm fantastic.
Right. And I didn't realize at the time, all those years I was living like that, right? But just think, I never had anything happen.
You had an easy life.
Oh, very. I look back, very easy. And I didn't realize how easy. And I have to put this in play, and for those that are just listening, I'm a Black woman in Minnesota, right? So obviously I know I'm Black, but I didn't realize how easy I just have it, right? So just have it. Then you put in how easy I have it as a woman, then how easy I have it as a Black woman. And people would say that, like, oh, what? This is your life? I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I'm thinking my parents work hard, right? I can watch my parents work hard. Well, why wouldn't I have this life? They work together to make this life for us. So now I'm going to work the same life to make sure my kids have this. But that's not the way it goes.
But this is a really interesting place to go. And we talked about this, at lunch. So do you think that that's a bad mindset? Like, is there anything wrong with you being a Black woman in Minnesota pre-George Floyd, growing up thinking, basically minus Bill Cosby, like I'm one of the Cosby kids and like life is amazing and nothing is different between me and the white kid next door?
So with that being said, I was always compared to the Cosbys.
You were? See, I didn't know that.
Always. Oh, it doesn't bother me. It never did. I always thought and I realized they were kind of doing a dig, right? Like, some people were like, oh, she's like one of the Cosbys. I was like, my dad's not a doctor. My mom's not an attorney.
My dad isn't roofing people.
Yeah. I was like none of that. But I was just like, oh, okay. But to them, that was the only constant, stable Black family that was successful that they knew. In my world, my whole family was. my dad's siblings were, my mom's siblings were, my cousins. I was just like, what are you guys talking about? My mom's friends, my dad's friends. I was like, I don't know what world you guys live in, right? So for me, no, it is realistic, right? Just not sometimes in Minnesota. In Minnesota, yes, it is. Obviously now people are like, oh, there's there's thousands of people. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was always, realistic. So.
And did your parents ever say to you, or should they have, I guess, looking back, like all of our parents, everyone tries their hardest with the tools that they have and the point in history they're born and the experiences that they've had. But do you think your parents, who were one generation before, I mean, racism wasn't just like something we sort of didn't talk about. I mean, they lived in a time when they saw the South, forget the North. There were 2 drinking fountains, right? I mean, they know that.
So my dad saw that, my mother didn't. My mother was raised in Iowa.
Okay, so she didn't.
She
had to have read it. Like she must have
She
known.
saw it. Yeah, she did, because her mother's from Mississippi, but she also grew up middle class. So she grew up, her father, worked at John Deere. Her dad was a foreman. She didn't, my mom grew up different too. So,
should they have told you? Like, should someone have said, hey, just so you know, this isn't most people reality? Or are you glad they didn't?
I just don't think that,
it never came up, maybe.
It really didn't.
That's so awesome. Because
it didn't come up. It didn't come up. They just told me I was amazing. I could do whatever I want. So what I didn't realize is that intimidated other white people.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Looking back for the things that I had blinders on. Like I thought, I grew up in a Christian Lutheran school, right? So where that was a very loving environment, and I went to an all white Christian Lutheran school. I didn't have racism there. There was like maybe an incident or two, but very, very, like I would say for that time, 70s and 80s, like nothing
remarkable, really.
Yeah. And then being born and raised in Edina, Bloomington, I didn't really experience too much. And my dad's presence. My dad is a proud, Black man from the South. He's a Vietnam vet, worked for 3M, his one job his whole life. He had a presence that you didn't mess with his family. You did not come on his property. He paid his taxes. He owned his house, and you didn't want any parts of that. And so they were very good friends with our neighbors who were all white. I don't know. And I had a strong Black household. Every picture was Black. The Santa Clauses were Black in there. And this is the 80s, I don't know. But then my whole world was white around me. So to be around that, I knew I was Black, but I don't, I look back, I realized it was a unique situation. I do realize it was unique. At the time, I just thought it was living.
Right. But that's kids. Like, they don't know that their normal isn't the normal.
Yeah. And then my friends were great, right? I've had some great childhood and lifelong friends. Their parents were great. Their parents didn't treat me different. They didn't. And vice versa, that I'm still friends with. So.